Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Saviors of Uldum. We got all the rest of the cards and it's time to review them. I'm going to move pretty quickly through these because you'll get a few more card reviews in the next few days. We're going to do like star ratings of some kind, power rankings. You'll see. But in this one, there's almost 50 cards that we got in the last 24 hours. So we're going to move a little bit quicker than normal, but I'll give you guys all the goods nevertheless. Starting off with the new Rogue quest. Bizarre Burglary. Add 4 cards from other classes to your hand to complete the quest, and the quest is once again an automatic hero power, and the automatic hero power gives you a 3/2 weapon with immune when attacking, instead of your 1/2 weapon that you'd normally get as a rogue. So is that worth it? That's pretty good. It certainly leads into more of a controlling rogue deck type, and that's still possible. There's still a lot of rogue thief mechanics and things that reward you for having cards of other classes while playing rogue. It's just control rogue as a whole has been a very difficult narrative for the rogue to follow. So, I can't say this is like a game-breaking card. It's certainly very good. Not losing health while, killing your opponent's stuff is extremely powerful. It's an extremely powerful quest, but I don't know if the deck as a whole is quite there yet. I do think it's pretty close, however, so keep an eye on it, and of course, we'll give it a try. I'll be playing viewer decks for a while, and I'm sure this will be one of those. Next up, we have Tenants. So this card is very similar to a card that was cancelled from the original set of Hearthstone. 2 mana, deal 3 damage with Priest, and heal for 3, I believe was the card. I think it cost 3 mana. In any case, this one costs 2. So, it's in line with like the very best 2-drop removals, and it gives you Lifesteal, which means you can actually scale the healing effect if you scale the damage up through spell damage. So, not bad. Certainly very nice, very effective way to remove something in the early game that isn't restricted based on how much attack your target has. Hello, Priest. Fairly unconditional removal. That's very good. I think we'll see lots of this stuff without a doubt. Next up, we have Holy Ripple. Holy Ripple is deal 1 damage to all enemies and restore 1 health to all friendly characters. So it's basically Holy Nova miniaturized to 2 mana. Now for 2 mana, that's a pretty good deal. Yes, you're doing 1 less damage, and yes, you're healing for 1 less, but you often wouldn't get the full value of the heal from Holy Nova, and you often wouldn't get the full value from the damage of Holy Nova either. Even to scale Holy Nova, you kind of needed some spell damage at that stage in the game. Holy Ripple for 2 mana actually kills plenty of things at that stage in the game, and if you have some spell damage, well, you're scaling up Holy Nova immediately, basically. So actually, it's a pretty strong card. If you think Holy Nova is good, I think Holy Ripple is a little bit better. Now, Holy Nova is not a card that is seen in constructed decks as of late, but it's still on the verge. So Holy Ripple being better, I think there's a good chance we'll see some of this card in the coming weeks. Next up, we have Sinister Deal. 1 mana, discover a lackey. So there is another lackey being added to the pool, so you're not quite going to get exactly the one you want. That's why I think this card is maybe a little bit worse than it seems, but it's still a pretty good card. In general, discovering a lackey, if the pool is really small, having a specific lackey is very strong. But with the lackey pool, I believe, being 5 right now, or 6, you're not always going to get what you want, and I think that makes the card a little bit worse. But we might still see it because lackeys are really good. Injured Tol'vir, 2 cost, 2/6. Whoa, Battlecry, deal 3 damage to this minion. Rip. But it helps along like the Priest quest of having to heal stuff, I suppose. It still has Taunt, and it's still a 2 mana, 2/3 Taunt. That's not bad. It's not a bad card. I can see some constructed decks utilizing the fact that this is injured, but probably not a great many. I think you'll see it in the rare occasion in constructed, but of course it'll be a staple arena card because it's a 2 mana, 2/3 with Taunt. Why not? Next up, we have Beaming Sidekick. It's a 1 mana, 1/2, and it gives a friendly minion +2 health. So it's very similar to Power Word Shield. You get the 2 health effect, and instead of the card draw, you get a 1/2. Now, 1/2 in the early game is a lot better than the card draw, but as you move on from the early game into the mid game to the control game, Power Word Shield becomes a lot better of a card. Now, which one is better? Well, depends what you're trying to do as a priest. There's honestly some suggestive nature of a Zoo Priest in this next expansion. So possibly the minion is better than Power Word Shield, and possibly it will see some play as a result, not just in Priest, it's a neutral card. Might see play in all of the other classes even. It's just a pretty good zoo card. Then we have Sandhoof Waterbearer. This is in fact a priest card. 5 mana, 5/5. At the end of your turn, restore 5 health to a damaged friendly character. So character does include your own hero. So this card might just heal you at the end of your turn. If it heals you for 5, is that bad? No, it's actually pretty fair. The repetitive end-of-turn cycling effects, they're quite strong. I mean, we had 8 mana, 8/8 with this effect for 8 in the past, and, you know, that card was pretty good. So I imagine this card's going to be very good. The fact that it's common might make it one of the staples of the, you know, budget priest deck players, and it might even see a lot of play in the more advanced decks. It has the power level. It's just, I feel like if you're going with a heal archetype, you typically want slightly lower cost than 5, but, you know, that's just me predicting things. How it turns out, we'll have to see. Next up, we have Temple Berserker. It's a 2-cost 1/2. It has Reborn, and it has 2 attack when damaged. So if you're unfamiliar with the Reborn mechanic, when the minion dies, it comes back injured with 1 health remaining. So it's a 2 mana 1/2, and possibly it becomes enraged, gets the damage bonus. It's possible, but it'll certainly get it after it dies. After it dies, it'll be a 3/1 basically, and if you heal it, it'll be a 1/2 again. So a bit of a weird card, but you know, it's a pretty powerful effect. Overall, that's a pretty annoying small minion, and it's a lot of stats for a small amount of mana. These Reborn minions, I think they're going to take you by surprise, especially the small ones, because they're going to replace a lot of the Death Rattle options that we've been using for a long time in this game. And we have Serpent Egg. It's another egg. It has more health than the other ones. For what reason? I don't know. It's a 2-cost 0/3, and the Death Rattle summons a 3/4. Is that good? It's alright. Yeah, having more health on the base body is decent if you have permanent buffs, and what comes out of it is still pretty strong. Depends how often you want to kill your stuff. I can see it making some sense in like a Zoo Warlock, but just off the top of my head, not too much else. Though in Zoo Warlock, I think it's a very fair card, so we might see plenty of it. Neverest Thrasher. Now this card we'll certainly see plenty of. It's a 3-cost 4/5, so it has very solid 4 mana cost stats, and each time it attacks, it deals 3 damage to your hero. So playing this card doesn't deal damage to you, which is quite good, because traditionally a lot of the powerful overstated Warlock minions, their cost to being overstated was paid upfront, was paid as a battle cry. Neverest Thrasher doesn't do that. He only charges you for having extra stats if he actually gets to attack. So you're always getting value for your invested health. And I think that's a very powerful effect. And the fact that he costs 3 mana and has considerable stats, the fact that he'll probably stay alive until the very next turn, I think is very relevant to the Vulture. We revealed this card earlier in the expansion reveal cycle. It's a 4-cost 3/5 beast, and after your hero takes damage on your turn, you summon a random 3-cost minion. So you play a Thrasher, then you play the Vulture on the following turn, and attack with your Thrasher to get value instantaneously. That's quite the combo, and Zoo is looking pretty solid right now. Bug Collector, 2-cost 2/1, Battlecry, summon a 1/1 Locust with Rush. Is that good? It's okay. I feel like we have a lot of cards that kind of do a similar effect around this mana, but it's okay. It kind of competes with them, so we might see it in some decks, but it's certainly not going to be like a staple to the decks that we see it in. Candletaker, 3-cost 3/2 Reborn, so it's basically a 3-cost 3/2 that comes back as a 3/1. These cards are better than they look, but I feel like this is possibly on the weaker end of things. Depends how competitive the 3-drop cycle is, and it depends how degenerate it becomes to have a whole slew of Reborn minions. It might be one of those things where you don't judge the Reborn minions individually, you judge them on the fact that a deck might run like 10 of them, and it's just impossible for the opponent to really deal with all the Reborns at the same time. So I think as a standalone, it's pretty mediocre, but collectively, it might actually shine a little bit more. And we have one of the most interesting cards ever, in fact. It's a 2-cost 3/2 Zephyrus the Great. It's an elemental for whatever reason that doesn't really impact anything right now, I believe. Maybe Shaman. If your deck has no duplicates, wish for the perfect card. What's that? What is the perfect card? Well, this is a card that Blizzard is proud to say that they've put a lot of time in designing. Apparently, it will judge the current board state and your hand for cards that fit what you need. So, for example, if you play this on turn 2 and you have nothing to play next turn, it will likely suggest 3 mana cards from all the classes available, just anything. You might just get exactly the card you're looking for, even from a different class. Now, if you play this and your opponent has a whole bunch of minions, well, you're probably going to get a board clear that suits that situation. So the effect is actually ridiculously strong, and it's a well-stated card. It's not like you're paying for the fact that you're getting this card draw, essentially. You're paying with it because you're going to have a singleton deck. If your deck has no duplicates is the main cost of playing this card. And that can be a pretty steep cost. We have several legendaries introduced in this expansion that require the same thing, so you kind of fare up that cost in a sense, but nothing else. Now, I feel like this will be a very powerful card nevertheless, but I feel it will be even stronger next expansion, not because I have any idea what will be included in that expansion, but certainly because there will just be more cards added in that expansion. The larger the card pool, the much better the singleton decks become. So if you don't see too much of it this expansion, I wouldn't disenchant this card. I'd hold on to it at the very least for the next. Worthy Expedition. So Druid, it's having like this theme of choose one cards. Well, the quest lets you choose both options, and Worthy Expedition lets you choose one of a specific double option that you're going to want to take. I think it's going to be pretty good in like a quest Druid deck. Otherwise, probably not that good, but we'll see. It's a small spell in Druid, possibly some cycling. Who knows? Ancient Mysteries. It's another cheating effect for Mage Secrets. So we've seen some Mage Secret cards this expansion that either do something very powerful when you play a secret, or do something very powerful if you have a secret up already. Ancient Mysteries lets you get to that secret. It's a 2 mana, draw a secret from your deck, it costs 0. So you actually gain on the discount. So you pay 2, Mage Secrets typically cost 3. So you're getting a mana advantage that way. You're also thinning your deck, which is very strong, and you're going to have a higher consistency of drawing secrets. Now, the secret requirement type of deck is typically played as a tempo deck, so the fact that you might draw your secrets before you draw Ancient Mysteries, thus making Ancient Mysteries worthless later on throughout the game, isn't that big of a deal, because those type of decks typically win or lose before most of the deck is drawn. So it's better than it looks, and I think you should probably give it a try. Oasis Surger. It's another card that is probably a lot better than it looks. It actually looks pretty good. So it's a 5-cost elemental for Druid. It's a 3/3 with Rush, and you either get to buff it to a 5/5, so a 5 mana 5/5 Rush. I think it's a very solid card. Or you get a copy of the minion, so you get a 5/5, 3/3 with Rush, and another 3/3 with Rush. And in that case, it's also a pretty solid choice. Now, the interesting case becomes when you can choose both options through the new Druid quest, or perhaps through some old wild means. In that case, if you can choose both options, you're getting 5 mana, 2 5/5 Rush minions. You're getting 10/10 worth of Rush for 5, which is absolutely bonkers. So, this card is kind of tied in the standard format to the Druid Quest choose type of deck. And from what I've seen, I think that deck has a good chance of surviving, which means that this card is probably a very good card and a very relevant card in the upcoming meta. Crystal Merchant. Kind of on the same case, unspent mana, you have to have at the end of turn basically floating mana. So if you have 4 mana that turn, you play this, you have 2 mana left over, the effect will trigger. If you have 3 mana and you play this, the effect will trigger. If you have 2 mana and you play this, the effect will not trigger, but it happens at the end of each turn. So I think the closest card to compare to this is Manatide Totem. Manatide Totem is pretty similar. If you play a 3 mana Manatide Totem, you might as well play a 2 mana Crystal Merchant and not use your last mana crystal. You're basically getting the same effect, the same card, but not just higher stats. It has attack, so it can defend itself. That's a pretty big difference when it comes to playing against Zoo and tempo decks and whatnot. Now, the downside comes on the follow-up turns. So on the follow-up turns, it's not quite relevant. It's not quite the same. Because you're going to have to constantly be floating mana. You're going to constantly have to have mana left over if you want the effect to trigger. However, from the other side of the board, your opponent might not see it quite in this fashion because your opponent might see Crystal Merchant as a constant threat. So your opponent, as with Mana Tide, is probably going to try to remove it as soon as possible. And as such, it's not really a steep price to pay. I think it's a little bit better than Mana Tide Totem, and we do see Mana Tide Totem from time to time in Shaman decks, so I imagine we will see Crystal Merchant from time to time in Druid decks the same. Dune Sculptor, 3 mana 3/3 mage card after you play a spell add a random mage minion to your hand. Now it's important to note that mage minions include mostly really powerful stuff. It's not like you're going to get some neutral garbage. You're going to get some really good minions every time you play a spell, and it's a 3 mana 3/3. So if you play this and play one spell to get one minion, it's as if you had like one card generator. Instant value. This card is obviously absolutely crazy as a result of that. There's no chance this card is ever bad when you play it. And it's just a perpetual insane effect. Why not? Golden Scarab. 3 cost 2/2, discover a 4 cost card. Now, there's a lot of 4 cost cards. It's nice to curve out. It's a beast. But I think in the current meta right now in the game, even with the control decks, things are a little bit too aggressive in order for this to survive. I do not have much faith for our Scarab, but in Arena, sure, we'll see some of it at the very least. Unseal the Vault. This is a pretty interesting one. So this is the new Hunter quest. The quest is to summon 20 minions, and the reward is that as a hero power. Give your minions +2 attack. This is like a permanent effect. This is completely insane. This is just the crazy snowball mechanic. So how easy is it to complete the quest? You might think, playing 20 minions is really hard. You'd be right. Playing 20 minions is really hard, but you don't have to play 20 minions, you have to summon 20 minions. So cards that summon minions often summon minions in larger packs than one. So if you build your deck around the quest, and I don't think it's that hard or that costly to do so, I think you can get the reward probably in the turn 7 to 8 range, at which point if you play small charging minions, doggos perhaps, and buff them with the roar, you're going to have a pretty consistent way to finish the game. I think this deck is going to be pretty good, but I do think it's going to be tied to how much warrior there will be in the meta because it'll probably be a bit of an all-in deck. You're not going to have that many win conditions after just charging doggos or whatever, maybe stealth beasts or something. I don't know. Other than that, you're not really going to have much of a window to win the game. So if your opponent is constantly healing or constantly gaining armor, it'll be a pretty weak deck against that match. So we'll have to see how that works out. But I think the power level is there, and this is certainly a quest worth trying. Ancestral Guardian. 4 cost 4/2, Lifesteal with Reborn. So Lifesteal is a pretty powerful effect, as we've learned over the years. Lifesteal just helps you heal for a lot. The fact that it has Reborn, if your opponent doesn't have several spell removals, you're going to get some life out of this. But I feel like it's fairly low stats, limit it quite a bit. Though, again, how many Reborn minions can you play? How many Reborn minions can your opponent deal with? It might just hit that critical mass of Reborn minions where you play it along with all the other ones, in which case it might be better than we think, but as it stands, standalone as a card, doesn't seem that good to me. Subdue. Set a minion's attack and health to 1. Well, that's pretty good. It's very close to a 2 mana hard removal, which is completely insane. Obviously, death rattles and stuff will still trigger, so it's not like polymorph, hex, whatever, that kind of removal, but I think it's an extremely powerful type of removal nevertheless. Now, Paladin would only make use of this card in general if it's playing a slower or mid-range or combo basis, so we might not see that deck. We might not see a lot of this card because it's tied to that archetype. But when that archetype does rise again, I imagine you'll see plenty of this card and you'll think of me telling you just how powerful it can be. It can be really powerful, by the way. This is an interesting one as well. 8 cost 8/8 Octo. It's an octopus. It's got 8 things. 8. There's 8 things on the card. Do you get it? I hope you got it. Well, one of the 8 things is drawn 8 cards when it dies. So that's a lot of cards. 8 cards is typically too many. And it's a very interesting card because it does impact the game even if people don't put it in their decks. There's a decent number of minion recycling, minion evolution effects, as you will, especially in Mage, as you know, to a point where you'll probably see this card come up when it's not in their deck. And when it comes up and it's not in their deck, they're probably going to have like 5 or 6 cards in their hand. And then they have this card's Death Rattle, draw 8. It can certainly sabotage their deck by removing a decent portion of them, and also sabotaging their fatigue game, because, well, you're not going to have one if you're 8 cards ahead over your opponent. So it's one of those cards that I'm glad it exists, even though it probably won't see that much play. But on the other hand, it might see a bit of play the same. I feel like if I was playing a pretty aggressive deck, this card would be pretty good. If I could just dump my hand all the time, this card's great. If I'm playing an aggressive deck and I have an 8/8 on the board, my opponent's going to have to do something about it. And if they do, well, I have a whole new hand for him to deal with. So, pretty promising card. And even if it sees no play, we're going to have some laughs nevertheless. Swarm of Locusts. 6 cost, summon 7 1/1 Locusts with Rush. That's good value. Yep. Kill stuff. You get to choose where you kill it. You get the beast synergy. You get the summon 7 for the hunter quest we just talked about. That's pretty good. Now, the bad part is it's obviously not like an aggro card, so you're going to have to play at the very least a slower end mid-range hunter for it to be well themed and synergized with your deck. And that's kind of where we run into the problems, where that type of hunter deck is always marginal in terms of viability. Though it's a whole new expansion. We'll have to see what we can come up with. Desert Hare. 3 cost 1/1. Battlecry. Summon 2 Desert Hares. This is not that good. We have like a mechanized version where you get 2 1/1s, but it's a 2/1 and you get mechs over beasts. Mechs are typically a lot better than beasts. So Desert Hare, it's not like horrible, but it does get a little bit outclassed, and I don't think it's going to make the cut. Clever Disguise. It's a rogue card. Add 2 random spells from another class to your hand. Keep in mind, spells are typically powerful cards, unless you're talking about like the low-cost Shaman and Druid spells, in which case they kind of suck. So it's a little bit of a, just throw it out there. But I think if you're playing the Thief Rogue format, this is a pretty good way to acquire some cross-class cards, and why not? Let's just say. Vecina. This is one of the more powerful cards that we've seen so far from this expansion. So it's a 4 cost 2/6, which are fair stats, not too powerful, but fair. And while you're overloaded, your other minions have +2 attack. So it's not quite Bloodlust, but basically, you're not going to put Bloodlust in your deck anymore. A lot of the decks that run cards like Bloodlust are typically ones that push for a win condition as soon as possible, and as a result end up even unintentionally running a lot of overload cards. And if you're running a lot of overload cards, I don't see much reason to ever play Bloodlust if you're playing Vecina, unless you want multiple Bloodlust effects, in which case I can understand it, but I think that range of decks is pretty limited. In my mind, Vecina replaces Bloodlust for a lot of options, and honestly, it makes Shaman a lot stronger of a class. I think we'll see a lot more Vecina than we will Bloodlust in the future, and as a result, if you get this card, try it, because I don't think it's going away anytime soon whatsoever. Mogu Flesh Shaper. So it's a 7 cost 3/4, which is obviously garbage. If you evolve into this, you're going to be pretty sad, but it costs 1 less for each minion on the battlefield. So if your opponent has like 3 things and you have like 3 things, it's like a 1 mana 3/4 rush. That's pretty good, right? Yeah, it's pretty good. It just entirely depends on the meta. If tons of people are playing aggressive decks, it's obviously not too bad at all. But otherwise, pretty marginal, I would say. You're going to want to get this down to at least 3 mana, which means 4 minions on the board. 4 minions on the board is pretty common, but not like insanely common. So yeah, I think it'll probably be quite good, but if you're seeing like a control warrior meta or something like that, you're not going to see these cards around. Sandstorm Elemental is a 2-cost 2/2 elemental, and it deals 1 damage to all enemy minions when you play it and overloads, so it's a pretty fair card. We've had like, Maelstrom Portal or something like that, 1 damage to all enemies, and it gives you a random 1-drop. This is pretty similar to that. You get the overload, and you can't scale it with spell damage, so it's just a good card. I don't think it's like a game-breaking card, unless of course like Tempo Druid becomes the main deck once again, and who knows, that could happen, I guess. It's just a good card. Good cards, they see play from time to time, but they rarely break the game. You rarely see people complaining about it on Reddit. Mischiefmaker, 3-cost 3/3 Battlecry, swap the top card of your deck with your opponents. So for 3 mana to get a 3/3 and an often inconsequential effect, that's not that good, but if there are decks out there that rely on multiple combo pieces to OTK you, it is a combo disruptor. And, you don't have to target like a minion, you don't have to target a spell, as most of the previous combo disruptors did. You target the draw, and typically the draw is quite good. The way you have to think about it is, if you're playing against a combo deck and you're still not dead, well, the combo piece they need is still in their deck. So you have a chance of getting it, chance of disrupting the combo, and typically winning the game instantaneously. So it's better than it looks, but I still think it's pretty crappy. Living Monument, 10 mana, 10/10 taunt. Yep, that's about it. You'd never play this card. In Arena, it's okay, I suppose, and you'll mostly evolve into it probably as a mage and be relatively happy because, well, it has taunt, why not? Pit Croc Liske. This is actually a very interesting card. This is a card that you might see, well, 8 mana, 5/6, that's like a 5 mana body worth of stats. It's a beast and it deals 5 damage to something. So is that good? Doesn't seem that good. Seems like it costs too much mana. Now, this is one of those moments where things are maybe a bit deceptive. Let's compare it to one of the best overall arena cards in Hearthstone's entire history, Firelands Portal. So Firelands Portal is 1 less mana, you deal 5 damage, just the same as Pit Croc Liske's Battlecry, and you summon a random 5-cost minion. Your average 5-cost minion is a bit worse than 5/6 worth of stats. If you play Firelands Portal and get a 5/6, you're pretty happy. I don't know the percentages involved, but if I had to guess, it's probably in the top 20% or so of 5 drops. Now, to pay 1 more mana to guarantee that, think of it this way. If Firelands Portal cost 8 mana and gave you a random 6 drop, it'll basically be a Pit Croc Liske. That would be a really good card still. So Pit Croc Liske is surprisingly good, though I believe because it costs 8 mana, it's probably not like constructed amazing. It's still maybe gonna slip into a deck or two, I feel. But in terms of Arena, it is one of those absolutely insane powerhouse cards. Pit Croc Liske is super powerful for Arena and might even see play in some of the decks you designed and constructed. Wasteland Scorpion, probably not going to be included in many of constructed decks either, but again, pretty fair for Arena. It's a beast, 7-cost 3/9 poisonous. It's going to take out a lot of dudes with it, but because it doesn't pose an immediate threat, it's on the low end of power levels. Blatant Decoy. It's a 6 mana 5/5, and when it dies, each player summons the lowest cost minion from their hand. The idea is that you play big stuff, and you hope that your opponent is not playing big stuff. That's about it, actually. There's not much more to it than that. Possibly there's some way to use this to cheat out a larger mana cost minion. So for example, if you had a combo that involved a 9 or 10 mana card, it's possible that you could play the Blatant Decoy and destroy it for like 7 or 8 mana in order to do some kind of OTK combo. That is the only way that I see this card seeing play. And it's still a little difficult because you might have to run multiple copies of it. So if Blatant Decoy pushes out another Blatant Decoy instead of your actual combo piece, well, it starts to suck once again. So I don't think it's that great, but it certainly could help the combo OTK type decks. So don't count it out. And if you get it, do not press the disenchant button instantaneously. Maybe wait a week or so. Faceless Lurker, 5 mana, 3/3 taunt, and the Battlecry doubles the health of this minion. So if you just play this card as it is, it's a 5-cost 3/6 taunt. Is that good? Not constructed good, but it's pretty fair for Arena. If you're looking at standalone power levels, it's not bad. It's really not bad. The way that you would actually consider playing this in Constructed is through hand buff effects. If you can buff it by +1/+1, it's a 5 mana 4/8 taunt. Is that good? Amazing. And if you have those new warrior +2/+2 effects to taunts in your hand, if it becomes a 5/10 taunt for 5, that's super crazy. So, it depends on that deck type basically for Constructed. And I think that deck type does have some merit. So I believe you will see some of the Faceless Lurker, both in Constructed because of that deck and Arena because in Arena it's just a fair taunt. Phalanx Commander, 5 cost 4/5. Your top minions have +2 attack. I see this card and I think of Warsong Commander. It's obviously not quite as bad, but I also think it's not great. Obviously, most top minions are health heavy and low on attack, so buffing their attack actually makes them into powerful minions. It's just standalone, it's terrible, and if you buff one thing, it's not good enough. So this card is basically good when you have more than 2, probably more than 3 taunts alive from the previous turn. How likely is that? Probably not that likely, so I'm not crazy about it. I think it's a pretty crappy card, but who knows? Surprise me, guys. Body Wrapper, 4 cost 4/4. Discover on the Battlecry a friendly minion that died this game, you shuffle it into your deck. So it's a pretty interesting effect. I think we might see cards like these in the singleton formats where there's very key cards that you want more of, but yeah, nothing really stands out for me, so I'm not that hopeful right now. History buff, however, certainly brings some hope to my eyes. It's a 3 cost 3/4, so this is still the most premium 3 mana cost stat line in Hearthstone's history, guys. 3 mana, 3/4, and without any negative effects, right? It actually has a positive effect. How about that? When you play a minion, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. The way that I see people playing this card is in the form of a zoo deck. If you play this, it's amazing on turn 3. And if you play like a 1-drop or a 2-drop, it buffs another 1-drop or 2-drop. I think if you get like 2 or 3 buffs, this card is worth it. And I think if I'm playing like a Zoolock, I'm going to get 2 or 3 buffs just about every single time I play this card. So I think this card is actually very solid. There might even be some kind of combo potential. If you're playing this and you don't have that many minions, but perhaps you have like lackey generators, perhaps you can constantly buff like a large charging minion, perhaps some Jenkins, perhaps. So who knows? Maybe there's some real combo shenanigans there, and I'd love to see you guys try it. Volpera Scoundrel is a 3 cost 2/3, and you get to pick a spell, and keep in mind Discover is your class, so you get, I guess, 2 options from your own class, and the third one is just a random spell. So if you don't like the 2 options that you're given, but I imagine you'll probably like the 2 options that you're given, or at least one of them, because again, your class's spells typically work with the cards you have in your deck, but if you don't like it, you can get a random spell. So you're getting 1 almost card draw. So it's like 3 mana, 2/3, almost draw card. Is that good? Yeah, it's not bad. Again, it's probably maybe good enough for the singleton decks, but not so outside of those. It's going to be very good in Arena, though, because you're going to have access to cards that are typically fairly rare in the draft cycle. Quickscent Elemental, 2 cost 3/2 Elemental, Battlecry, give all enemy minions -2 attack this turn. So this is a fair statted 2 cost minion just as it stands, has the Elemental tag and pretty worthless. And the Battlecry actually lets you crush your opponent's board. Now, when is it good to do that? It's pretty hard to do that because you're going to have minions that can attack from the previous turn, and your opponent has just had to have played a bunch of small minions. You debuff them all and you kill them all for free. That's certainly very good, but you wouldn't include this card against really any other type of deck. So it's possible that this card will see some play if you see tons of people playing like Zoolock, maybe like an aggro paladin. That could work. This card could work very well against those decks, but if not many people are playing those, you won't see any of this guy whatsoever. Kobold Sandtrooper is a 2 cost 2/1, Death Rattle, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. So I think this card is actually decent, and I'm sure that'll surprise a lot of people that are watching. The idea is that if you're capable of making an absolutely all-in pure Smork face deck, it's still 2 mana, deal 3 damage to your opponent's face, and it can do more because it has a body. It sounds stupid. I know the card looks really bad. Trust me, I know it looks really bad. But even though it looks really bad, I think it actually has some hope to see some play. Probably not though, but I didn't want to leave you guys hopeless. Spitting Camel is a 2-cost 2/4 beast. At the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to another random friendly minion. So if you just play it by itself, it's a 2-cost 2/4. Is that worth playing these days? Probably not. Now, the effect of damaging your other minions is typically bad, so it's definitely not worth playing. But I think the idea behind the card is you'd play it if you have other cards that you want to take damage. Possibly eggs, possibly like, acolyte type of cards, just there are some things that you want to self-inflict damage on. I can't imagine a deck around it, so I think the card is absolutely horrible, but that's why you'd play it. For that reason, I suppose. I don't know, I guess. Dwarven Archeologist is a 2-cost 2/3, and after you discover a card, reduce its cost by 1. So it's a 2-mana 2/3 with a cost discount effect. I think that's pretty solid. We actually saw a disgusting amount of Discover cards in this expansion, and we still have quite a number of them from the previous expansions in the standard set. So actually this card is quite strong. Again, it does depend though. Possibly in like a casino-style mage, I'm again more thinking that it's a little bit out of the power curve for standalone standard decks, but I think it is going to be included in a lot of the Highlander decks where you do actually require card discovery to come up with answers for your opponent's stuff. Armored Goon, 6 mana, 6/7. Whenever your hero attacks, gain 5 armor. That's really good, actually. It actually props up the Warrior Quest. So the Warrior Quest, the reward is like kind of irrelevant to attacking and all that kind of stuff. But the reward is a hero power that lets you not armor up anymore. So you have to run a whole bunch of weapons, then you can't armor up anymore once you complete the quest. So Armored Goon kind of bridges this deck. It bridges this idea for a deck. It bridges the fact that you may not need armor if you have a lot of weapons, and perhaps you can even attack with each one of them more than once a turn. Armored Goon lets you have hope for that type of deck and will certainly be included in it. I wonder though if it'll be included in normal control warrior. I would say probably not, but it's still not bad. Armor is certainly underrated. Gaining extra armor from time to time, especially as a burst, is an effect that people don't think it's very good, but in practice, it ends up being the difference between winning and losing versus aggro decks. And trust me, there will be aggro. Not that I know anything secret about the upcoming meta, I just know that there's always aggro. Totemic Surge. Give your totems +2 attack. Well, I suppose it's better than giving them 2 health. Yeah, that's all I got. Naga Sandwich is a 5-cost 5/5, kind of like the original Sea Witch. It changes the cost of spells in your hand to 5. So if you have like some really big spells, making them cost 5 is actually pretty crazy. If you have like 2 choice 10 mana cost spells, perhaps, you can make each of them cost 5 and cast both on the same turn. Is that good? Yeah, actually that's really good. Obviously you have to tailor a deck entirely around it, and then you have to constantly ask yourself the question of, can this deck really work? Is this deck really going to work in this meta? Can I survive against aggro? So it has a lot of issues on that sense that are not yet resolved, are not yet discovered. But in terms of standalone power level, this card is super powerful. Very cool card as well. Hyena Alpha, 4-cost 3/3 beast, and if you control a secret, you summon 2/2/2 hyenas. So that's pretty nice. It's pretty easy to control a secret, and if you control a secret, you get 7/7 worth of stats for 4. Hello, mid-range hunter with splashed in secrets. How do you do? Obviously a very powerful card. I think the consistency of using this effect is relatively high, which I think makes the card constructed viable. Solid stuff. Ramkahen Wild Tamer is a 3-cost 4/3. The Battlecry copy is a random beast in your hand. So we know that the changes that Hearthstone had some months ago makes it so copies actually, you know, they work off of the stat buffs they already have. They work off of the mana discounts they already have. So the idea behind this card is you have like perhaps a choice gigantic charging beast that you've discounted the mana of. Then you play this when it's, you know, the only beast left in your hand, and you have multiple combo pieces as a sense. So it's kind of like a combo activator, but I don't know. I am not overly confident that deck type will work, so I'm not overly confident this card will be particularly good, but it certainly has potential to be strong in that type of combo hunter deck. Lastly, Garden Gnome. Let's finish with some gardening. How about that? It's a Druid card, 4 cost 2/3. If you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, summon 2/2/2 Trance. So that's pretty good. Druid often runs like the token playstyle, and there are some spells that cost more than 5 that you already run in a token Druid, but not that many, and not all the token Druid decks include those spells. So it's possible that with some changes to the current token Druid list, this card will make it in there because it is standalone, again, a very powerful card. 6/7 for 4 across 3 bodies. That's very strong. But, you know, how much will it cost your deck to have this proc reliably? That we'll have to see. On top of that, possibly this is another mechanic for treants that makes it possible to activate the treant mechanics in the game. There are actually some synergies off trees. We haven't really seen a deck built around them because, well, it hasn't really been worth it yet. I don't think this will be what, you know, pushes it over, but who knows? It's certainly possible. That's it for now, guys. I'll be doing lots of content on the upcoming expansion in the next few days. Tonight on stream, I'll probably be doing some deck building. And if you want to send over some ideas, I'd love to have you on the stream. So check it out. Link for that is below. And we'll see you guys, as always, tomorrow.